Greetings to all C3RF members and friends across Canada, indeed around the world, and a special welcome to the folks at Veterans for Freedom on their dedicated streaming channels as they view this video summary of the C3RF update for 18 April 2025. The title of this update is To Feudalism in a Handbasket, and it begins by noting how the expression to hell in a handbasket denotes a chaotic situation inevitably destined to end in disaster. It has been with the English language for centuries now and periodically comes into common usage during times of enhanced uncertainty. In the 17th century, for example, its use was inspired by a conspiracy fabricated by rogue Anglican personalities. The conspiracy entailed the charge that Roman Catholic forces were about to seize power from the ruling monarchy, thereby throwing London into a reign of terror. Then in the 18th century, we saw the guillotine of the French Revolution providing a reference point for the expression by virtue of the handbaskets that were used to collect the heads that were severed by the national razor. Once again, we saw the phrase popping up in a time where terror was afoot, with the perpetrators taking their societies to hell unceremoniously in a handbasket. It is interesting to note in the examples above, the terror that ran amok in London and Paris were underpinned by toxic ideologies. In the case of the Papist plot, the ideology was religious in nature and manifested itself in a running battle between the Roman Catholic hegemony that ruled the European continent and the Anglicanism that emerged from the split engineered by Henry VIII. In the case of France and its revolution, its founding ideology would be based on the Enlightenment ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, and aimed to overthrow the monarchy to establish a republic. Things would go sideways, however, as external threats and internal divisions within the revolutionary camp would lead to a rise of a radicalism intent on quashing contrary views and persons. The resulting reign of terror over the period 1793 to 1794 would see a committee of public safety exercising virtual dictatorial control over the French government, even as the national razor filled handbaskets in assembly line fashion. One cannot help but wonder if ideologies have turned toxic in Canada and are creating a foundation from which terror can be unleashed upon the land. Most certainly when one looks at woke ideologies like diversity, inclusion, and equity, or critical race theory, or gender-affirming care, one can easily discern a progressive hardening of the related narratives. In all instances, we see virtuous proclamations of the need to rid ourselves of discriminatory behavior shift to the need to shun, censor, and punish those who would question the new dogmas. And so begins a process that can be seen to be akin to that engineered by the Jacobins in the French Revolution as they instituted a, quote, law of suspects, unquote, that employed terror to crush obstruction of the will of a draconian Committee of Public Safety. Kind of like Canada's backburner Bill C-63 or the Online Harms Act that has the power to process anonymous charges of hate speech either now or in the possible future, into house arrest, onerous fines, and gagging, even as it creates its own Committee of Public Safety in the form of an insular Digital Safety Commission. The fact that these and other wackadoodle ideologies are prompting fear and terrorizing the good citizens of Canada is evidenced on several fronts. During the course of the Wuhan virus crisis, for example, such apprehension was plainly discernible during the government's reaction to Freedom Convoy 2022. It was all about hitting a fly with a hammer as the government turned on peaceful and legal protesters with the invocation of martial law through the Emergencies Act. This incredible overreaction was offered in lieu of a simple request by the protesters, most of whom were blue-collar truckers and workers, to dialogue on the issues of vaccine mandates. They were merely wondering how it was that they could be on the road keeping the Canadian economy going in the face of lockdowns and broken supply chains for 2 years without the mandates that now, apparently, were existential. Instead, they were met by police with truncheons and horses, while the single moms amongst them had their bank accounts frozen for $50 donations to the trucker cause. Then there was the crackdown on the rule of law. It has become plain and a demonstrated fact that Canadians are not only losing their individual rights and freedoms, but the concept of the rule of law as well. The idea that all are subject to equal access and treatment under the law is receding rapidly as police show favor to special interest groups, even as they persecute those who dare to question the orthodoxy of the day. So it was with the calamitous actions of the Black Lives Matter and Hamas-supporting Free Palestine movements as police took a knee or served up coffee and donuts, respectively. What should rank-and-file citizens think as they fear to leave their homes in the face of intimidating crowds waiting for them to venture into the street? What to think as salt-of-the-earth Canadians witness the crushing of nearly 200 years' worth of Pelian police policies as the Ottawa Police Services punish Detective Helen Gruce for daring to investigate the extremely suspicious deaths of a cluster of 9 Ottawa infants. How could Canadians not be terrified by such a trashing of their cherished rule of law? It's bad enough that Canadians are made to suffer abuse by those sworn to serve them, but it's even more worrisome that these same institutions and personalities actively stymie any attempt to restore lost rights and the rule of law. Indeed, it can be argued that Canadians are actually witnessing the mocking of the laws of the land by their once trusted leaders and bureaucrats. How else to explain the Liberal government's reticence to accept the court's ruling that the invocation of the Emergencies Act was anti-constitutional and then add injury to insult by appealing the decision? Is it really their intention to question the validity of the court's interpretation of Sections 2 and 8 of the Charter? Then, as noted by former Detective Best in our C3RF In Hot interview, we see the province of Ontario undo nearly 200-year tradition of independent policing with amendments to its Police Services Act. These amendments unbelievably require officers to obtain permission to investigate public officials, and the Liberal Party calls itself the Charter Party. The headlong plunge into hell in a handbasket is even more worrisome given the absence of any concern by any sitting political party. Instead, the actions of Orange Man Bad and his disconcerting efforts to upset the global trading system are being used to displace any discussion of Canada's demonstrated transition into a feudal post-national state. Canadian political parties with sitting members of Parliament have decided to forego any debate on evaporating freedoms or justice to play a cynical game of elbows up against the world's largest economy. It would be all about trade war instead, as all parties, save for the People's Party of Canada and the Christian Heritage Party, both of which have no sitting members, puffed their chests and declared their fighting bona fides. Lost in all the huff and puff was any attempt to forestall the country's headlong rush into a state populated by lords and slaves, a headlong rush to hell of feudalism. Is it not inevitable that a feudal state comprised of lords and slaves awaits as our once trusted authorities refuse to analyze the offshoring of Canada's response to the Wuhan virus? Isn't it safe to assume that our individual and national sovereignty will be handed over to international agencies and institutions in the event of another WHO-declared pandemic? In the event of another internationally declared emergency stemming from climate change, perhaps? It matters not that supplanting citizen control through elected representatives with unelected offshore globalists was an absolute failure, as chronicled in the findings of our own National Citizens Inquiry and emerging provincial assessments. Indeed, should we be surprised that the solutions we bought into were so flawed given the fact that they were proffered by collectivist authorities? Authorities that have much to gain from turning free societies based on individual rights into feudal regimes. The fact that Canadian sitting political parties would prioritize the wants of offshore collectivist organizations at the expense of the country's own representative democracy should be of great concern to the everyday citizen. Certainly, this is hitting Johnny and Janie Canuck's pocketbook hard as citizens' oversight of national expenditures is lost. How else to characterize the disbursement of some $11 billion to aid foreign gender-centric initiatives? Or how about the cynical Liberal NDP ploy to combine a prorogue government with an election call to avoid oversight of a $40 billion withdrawal from the nation's consolidated revenue funds? All to deal with urgent appropriations that need not have been urgent given a once common respect for the right of citizens to be informed of and input such decisions through their elected representatives. Then again, why should slaves in a feudal society have any say over how their tax dollars are spent? And isn't that feudal society about to be cemented into place by a new prime minister who, arguably, is beholden to another feudal state in the form of China. Talk about going to feudalism in a handbasket. In closing, a reminder to join us at CanadianCitizens.org, where you can see this update in its full glory, including links to all of the cited documents. Simply go to the News tab at the top of the page and select C3RF Member Updates from its drop-down menu. Until next time, this is Russ Cooper signing off, wishing you and yours much happiness and freedom from C3RF.